Coming up on Folks, meet Washington Hackett Smith and Company, trailblazers in the world of finance, and New Orleans wildlife artist Charles Hutchinson, carving his legacy in wood, all on today's edition of Folks. Hello everyone and welcome to Folks. I'm Sonya Masingale. We're preparing for Black History Month, so we decided to take a break from our usual issue-oriented programming to give you another look at some of the trailblazers featured on Folks in the past. So let's get started. New Orleans is known for many things, but that it is in fact the financial center of Louisiana is not really common knowledge. New Orleans is actually home to several Black-owned and operated financial institutions, but Washington Hackett Smith and Company is the first of its kind. These three young trailblazers have established the first Black fiduciary company in the nation, and they're making a name for themselves in a big way. They're young, smart, well-educated, and on their way to fame and fortune. Not as actors, doctors, or lawyers, but as Washington Hackett Smith and Company, a fiduciary firm. The partners of this firm are pioneers of a sort.
In college, I was pre-med my first year and a half. And as the story goes, I went home to see what it would be like to work in a doctor's atmosphere. I thought I was going to be a doctor from the time I was real young. And I worked in one of those medical clinics, abortion clinics, over a summer. And obviously, it was a bad experience for a 17-year-old.
Christian Washington is the man who had the vision to start this particular business venture. His decision to make a career for himself in finance came in a roundabout way.
When I got back, what had been my other avocation all the way through school was selling things. I sold cars, I sold stereo equipment, I sold Amway. I mean, I just sold things, and that's how I made money to go to school. So somewhere along the lines, I put those things together and said, well, maybe I should look at what I do best or what I do and enjoy doing. And I went back and I got into economics because it took a broad view of the world and how finance and the world interact. Frankly, we're one of the first, I would say there's less than 100 firms, period, that ranges from the ma and pop on the corner to a large firm like an SEI or even Merrill Lynch getting involved in it on a cursory basis. So, as I said, it's an underrepresented marketplace by our people, but it's also an untapped marketplace in the altogether, and that's why we're in it.
Does being a Black firm help you or hurt you when you make your presentations?
In our case, it helps. And I make no bones about it. We're very targeted in our marketing. One of the things that we are a trailer to, our industry is trailing to, is the public finance industry or the municipal bond industry. Over the last 15 years or so, with the growth or rise in Black public officials, Black elected officials, and minority and women elected officials, there has been a heightened awareness and sensitivity to seeing minorities participate, or to use Tom Kane's words, to see minorities included through inclusion. And that's something that in public finance has been exploited quite well. Now the pension industry is starting to respond in the same way. And we use our minority status, our pioneering status, as a chip, if you will, as an advantage in the marketplace, especially early on. One of the keys to business success is finding a niche. And our niche is that, and being able to go to these areas where there is sensitivity already and respond to that with being professional and not a front or a mask for some other firm or what have you, but coming to the plate, being professional with good credentials, and it's worked well for us.
Washington Hackett & Smith is new to the fiduciary world. They're finding that experience comes quickly when you're handling millions of dollars.
The worst experience we found is that no matter what you do in any marketplace, no matter where you go, there are certain fundamental precursors that have to be in place before you can get business. And we went in, I won't name the client, but we went in one time on our own merits as a pretty new company with one client and 3 Ivy Leaguers, and did a winning presentation, an absolutely flawless presentation that was by all accounts, even by those who heard it, the best presentation they heard. However, since we had one account and less than 1 year in business, we obviously weren't named finalists in that situation. And it showed us that there is still a place for us to work smart, to joint venture at times with other firms that have more experience, where our political inroads as well as our professionalism can help that situation so that we can win. It's not just getting to the plate metaphorically, it's actually hitting a home run. And we got to the plate and hit a triple and then got thrown out at home. So that's probably the most negative experience, but we've turned it into a positive in that we learned from it.
To perform successfully as a team requires a high degree of confidence in each other's abilities, trust, and an intimate knowledge of each other's strengths, something Washington, Hackett, and Smith have in abundance.
It's interesting. The 3 of us are distinct personalities, and it helps because you need a worrier on the team, someone who's a point-in-time person who's considering the bottom line and the bills and the travel and the day-to-day inner workings of the business. And that's Toni. She's very in tune with every dime and every cent that comes in and goes out, and she's a good accounting-type person. She has that kind of background. And she's also very, very good at point-in-time.
I probably am more of a worrier, but I think it works out very well because, I mean, I think somebody has to be very concerned about how we're going to pull the company together financially, how we're going to have the funds to be able to do the sort of marketing that my other 2 partners are, I think, much better at. And but to have a really, really, to be a very good marketer, you really have to think very clearly. You can't be worried about, you know, incidental things like how we're going to pay phone bills and pay salaries of sales assistants and things like that. I mean, and so I understand that there has to be someone that has to be concerned about that, but I don't think it's something that everybody has to be concerned about.
Toni Hackett was the 2nd member of the team. True to her description as the worrier of the group, she handles most of the logistical concerns for the firm.
I'm the person that's sort of in the middle. I knew both of the parties separately and had worked with both of them separately. And when I met Chris and he talked about the business idea that he had, and I immediately thought, gosh, you know, if all 3 of us, I was thinking of Peppa, if all 3 of us could come together, I really thought it would make a very good trio. So neither of them really had known each other, but I felt that there were, it really would be a good mix.
How do you sell your services?
Well, it's really just, you know, a combination of things. Some things, in some way, we really, the business concept and the historical nature of the business sells itself, and that is because we are the first and only minority-owned firm in the country that provides the services we provide, which is pension consulting. So I think that there's an automatic niche there. You know, the people that are looking for qualified minority firms to do what we do, well, we're the only ones that are out there. So I think that as long as we just increase the awareness level of the marketplace about our company, I think that automatically gets us some business. And then we do some directive marketing, looking at those target cities where we perceive a little bit easier entry for minority firms, and we target them and we talk to the public officials or the city councilmen or the treasurers or the governor's offices to tell them about our services and let them know that we want to come in and talk to them and meet with them and talk about how we can be of service to the people in their state or their city or the municipality or school district or whatever.
Why would I, as owner of a company worth $5 million or more, be interested in the services of Washington, Hackett,
Well,
and Smith?
Sonya, that's a very good question because it's precisely what we're faced with when we go up against established consulting firms. I think what has to be considered is the fact that as our support service, we use a group out of San Francisco called Callan Associates, which is recognized as the market leader in providing consulting firms, those who are advising public and corporate pension funds. They are recognized as absolutely the market leader in providing the backup support work necessary. That's one reason. The second reason is that I personally think that the combination of my partners and myself, we provide a cross-section of personalities and strengths, which quite frankly is second to none.
Valerian Butler-Smith, who is described by his partners as the formal member of the firm, has visionary ideas about risk-taking.
One of the most outstanding things about young black people, young bright black people, is that we have for so long been seduced by the lure and the glamour and the money of the professions that we have overlooked or not been willing to take the plunge into something entrepreneurial. In my own family, they became doctors for 2 or 3 generations, but the courage I don't feel is there with my young peers. There is a precedent with me. At the end of the 19th century, my great-grandfather, Holbrook Hundley, was a successful entrepreneur in West Virginia and the Eastern Seaboard, but after that, we got cold feet, and the profession seemed safe. I mean, there was really hell to pay, so to speak, when I announced that I would be going into finance as opposed to one of the professions, but I think the statistics bear out that not only do we need more blacks in the mainstream of finance and banking, but that is an area which absolutely promises greater return on effort and intelligence than I think at this point the professions do. And that's something that I try to share with young people.
Smith is also realistic about the pros and cons of owning his own business.
The first thing that comes to mind, Sonya, is it is a potential drawback to some people to have to adjust their style of living in deference to future goals. The second thing is the responsibility of being directly involved with everything that goes on. When you have your own business, there is no major corporate structure to shield your mistakes, to hide behind if there is something which has not gone properly or according to plan. Every letter, every proposal, every phone call emanating from your firm is directly representative of you. That is a tremendous responsibility for some people. Some people are more comfortable in an environment whereby they have limited responsibility and a steady check. That is not me, and I don't think it's my partners. The pluses, as I say, are endless. First, there is economic self-determination, the ability to have everything that you do directly related to how well you do financially. Then there is the ability to make a contribution to the development of a greater presence in the black economic community and the economic community of this country in general.
You've been described by one of your partners as the formal member of the group. What's your reaction to that delineation of your personality?
My first reaction would be that it's absolutely true. My second reaction is that it would be silly to argue against it. I feel that having seen black entrepreneurs, black firms, from the time I was a young boy, I've seen them come onto the marketplace and pass off the stage almost as quickly as they come. One common thread running through all of them was a certain lack of organization, a certain lack of discipline. I'm certainly not saying that that is congenital to minority-owned firms, but it was something that I noticed. There was a certain lack of tightness, of message, of presentation, of organization that made a very strong impact on me. And I knew that I would end up with my own firm. And one thing that I promised myself I would do is to at least present the picture of strength, of direction, of organization, of exactness, even if we are undirected, disorganized, and searching for capital.
Knowing business people the way I do, they usually have a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 30-year plan. Where do you plan to be 10 years from now?
We want to see the company become a household name. Down the line, when you're thinking of fiduciary consulting or any kind of management consulting, you'll think of us. We have a thought in mind of seeing other things happen to promote minorities in our business. We want to see minorities come together to form investment companies and manage money as consortiums, and we'd like to do that as a mutual fund type idea or some idea like that. And so down the line, it would not surprise me if Washington Hackett Smith and Company was also known as a prime mover of money, a manager of money down the line.
I've learned from my partners, not worrying and panic does not help, but just kind of maybe prayer and clear thinking kind of gets us through.
10 years down the line, I see a firm which is national and international in scope. I see a firm which provides the finest, absolutely, advisory services to the nation's and the world's largest retirement funds. This represents an area which is practically the last undiscovered frontier. We have blacks in banking. We have blacks in powerful law firms in New York and San Francisco and Chicago. We have black investment banks. But to tap the billions and billions of dollars in American retirement funds that regular working people are paying in on a regular basis every year, to tap that tremendous pool of funds is something which absolutely has not been done, I should say. Our goal, my particular goal, I should say, in 10 years would be to have those funds serviced by Washington Hackett Smith and Company. Because we can do it, the opportunity is there, and shortly thereafter, probably a big horse farm in Virginia.
I'm pleased to share the news that Washington Hackett Smith and Company is thriving. They count as their clients the Washington, D.C. Retirement Fund, the City of Seattle, and the Philadelphia Gas Works Retirement Reserve Fund, among others. They're currently handling assets totaling well over $2 billion. We wish them continued success. Last season, we introduced you to New Orleans wildlife artist Charles Hutchinson, one of the first black wildlife artists recognized in the state of Louisiana. We found that his talents extend far beyond the duck decoys that made him famous. Charles Hutchinson grew up a child of both town and country. Living in Covington, Louisiana in the summers gave him a love of all creatures and respect for the balance of nature. His formal education in the city of New Orleans instilled a love for the arts and humanities. Hutchinson's first experience with carving wild fowl began by creating his own duck decoys for hunting. He was an adult before he realized that carving duck decoys was considered an art.
When the 30s and 40s come, even before, I would say about the 40s and 50s, they began to make the decoys in plastic. Now, all these men who carved, there was no way that they could keep up with these machines. It was popping them out, and the prices they were getting from was real cheap, and they were good to hunt over. They were light. They had everything that you needed to hunt. So what happened, the old men quit carving, and then the art form began to die. And some people realized that this was a dying art form, and they begin to collect the decoys. So they become very valuable, and people begin to collect them and all, and then this is where Charles W. Frank, he began to record these old men, you see, and he wrote 2 books about the Louisiana decoy carvers, and in his first book, he heard about me, and he came over and he spoke to me. And I became an intercessor for him, brought him to all the old black carvers and people, and he interviewed them. And we went to the Cajuns and all over. Everybody that carved decoys, we went there and recorded.
Each of Hutchinson's intricate sculptures begins with a seasoned piece of Tupelo gum, a wood handpicked by himself and family members from Louisiana bayous. His attention to detail is meticulous. This Lady Amherst pheasant is a perfect example of his work. Each feather is painstakingly carved, painted, and fitted individually by hand. The techniques Hutchinson employs are uniquely his own, since he has had almost no formal art training.
I went to one of the leading universities here, and I told him that I wanted to paint. But I always was interested in realistic art, because that was an avocation with me. In my youth, I wanted to be able to paint like Audubon, you know, because I liked wildlife. So I went there to this place. It was a prestigious school, you know, and they told me that what I was trying to do could be done with a camera, and I told them, but I wasn't a camera. I wanted to paint realistically, but the people there weren't into realistic work, you know. So they kept with trying to bend me to their way. So what I did, I came home, and my kids were very small, and like 3 and 5, and I gave them a canvas to just smear up. And they got on the floor, and they went to work with the canvas, you know, and they were painting it. I had newspaper all on the floor. So my wife got tired of that, and she said, now that's enough. Let's clean up this mess. So she put them in the tub, because they had as much paint on them as they had on the canvas. You know, they had having a ball. And I signed the canvas, and I brought it to my next class, and I gave it to the teacher. And she said, oh, you finally arrived. She said, oh, it's beautiful, you know. And before I could tell her what had happened, she went to the head of the class with it, and she was telling everybody about, you know, the wonderful job I did in showing it to them and all. When she gave it back to me, I thanked her, and that was the end of my formal education, you know. But realistic art now is coming into its own again, you know. It had never really waned, but certain schools just didn't go for it. But it's something, I call it the people's art, because you can never hang a realistic painting upside down and don't know it, you know. So I see in a lot of the shows they have to write top on the canvas so you'll know how to hang it, but you don't have that problem when you do realistic work, you know.
The making of Hutchinson's sculptures is slow and deliberate. One bird can take months to complete. To protect his artistic integrity, he has turned down numerous offers for the commercial production of his work. Before he begins to sketch an idea, he spends hours and sometimes weeks researching his subjects.
I do not use mounts. I use mounts only for reference for color, but not for form and shape and attitudes and all that. I try to get that from the real bird, or the live bird, because if you want to, if you copy, I've seen too many artists make mistakes copying a mount, and it's a dead-looking bird. You have to have that vitality, that life, and that comes from freedom of lines and freedom of painting and knowing your subject intimately. You have to really study them, you know, so that you can portray them in a manner that looks real and gives you the life, because you're trying more than just a visual image. You're trying to give the essence of the spirit of the thing. When we try to use birds, we're not working with things like the higher animals that can give you facial expressions. You know, even a dog can growl and show his fangs and everything. But with a bird, all you have is beak and eyes, and of course bristling, he can riff and roll his feathers. So most of it is body language, you know, so you have to give him the attitudes, and this has to be out of, when you get ready to do a subject, you pick out what you want to do, then you have to pick out the moment that you would make it, you think it would be the prettiest, or give you the best view at that moment, you know. And you take that microsecond and you draw him in that attitude. And then I like to make thumbnail sketches, and then I go from that to developing my piece. Something may catch my interest. For instance, the pheasants. I was doing all our birds, the local birds and everything, you know, and I was looking at the magnificent color of these birds and everything, you know. So that interests me, and then the interest began to grow. And then I thought about, well, why not do a series of pheasants? You know, no one had done it, you know, that I know of, a series of them. So that was it. I was off to the races on that, you know. And it's just like that with anything. You begin to build an interest in something, and then when you focus on it, all of these things are so beautiful that once you start focusing on it, then you can find a reason to want to do it, because it's there all the time, you know.
Because his sculptures have received so much attention, there's another side of Hutchinson's art that many casual observers miss. He is also a painter. The same amount of meticulous detail that goes into his sculptures is apparent in his paintings of wildlife. Observers often remark that his paintings rival those of passion for wildlife has instilled an intense concern for the environment as a whole.
Many of us walk by and the birds fly by, but we never really see it. You know, they're flying jewels, they're flying flowers, they're beauty. There's something that is part of us, but we're not very kind to them. You know, what we're doing to the environment is really bad. I can cry when I see what's happening. I remember as a boy when I used to go in the marshes and the swamps and everything. It was beautiful. I'm talking about maybe 50 years ago, you know, and it was beautiful. You know, a lot of the land I seen, I could just look at this acres of marsh that was green, and then they came with the pipeline canals, and then they began to cut the canals, and after a while I began to see this acres and acres of marsh dying, going away, you know, and that was sad. That's a sad thing to see.
Some of Hutchinson's sculptures have sold for upwards of $20,000, but money is not his main motivation for his art. It is his constant search for new challenges and an unending quest for perfection.
It isn't a glamorous job. You sit down there many hours doing this tedious work, but if you can keep this image in your mind as to what it's going to be, it's worth that time, because I spent many hours alone just cutting on this wood and all. And people would say, why does he do it? But in the end, when it's done, I feel it was worth it when I look at the creation when it's complete. You always strive for excellence. You try to make the thing, you're striving for perfection, which we can't reach because we are imperfect, you know. But the quest for perfection will really make you push. It will really make you improve and grow. So long as we seek perfection, well, this is great, but we know we'll never reach it. So when the piece is done, I look at it and say, now where did I fall short? Because the image I have in my mind, like I say, the image is blurred from the mind to the hand. You know, we never quite can make what this beautiful image we have in our brain, because we have almost perfect imagery in our brain. But by the time it gets to the finished stage, we can see that things are wrong. So I look for my faults, because through finding my faults, I can grow. And I hope to God I never get to the point where I make something and never see anything wrong with it, because then I'm finished.
Well, that's all for our program today. Next week, we begin our Black History Month series, Pause for Pride. There's sure to be some surprises and some good times ahead, so be sure to join us next week for another edition of Folks. Bye-bye.